how has it impacted the culture of your organization?
So I think that self-awareness piece for me really opened my eyes. I think listen, pause, think, and respond was big for me that we learned from Gary Phillips leading into that. But it's something I didn't understand how it connected to emotions and seeing how it connected my conversations with people, but then also gave me time to actually think more and give a poignant response and give a more brief response in return. So I could go on and on about this topic, but I would just keep it. I'm still on block one on self awareness, and how that all ties into the raising empathy and trying to get those things that we're trying to grow. But just being able to speak emotions in general too. I wasn't. I thought I was, but definitely that self awareness has taught me to be able to just think about it, but just in general, just pause, think, and process my emotions. So I'm not stuffing, avoiding, stewing, and brooding.
What is up, EQ gangsters? It is so awesome to be with you guys today and excited to share this episode. I am actually sitting here with, and for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this like live and see the whole crew here. We kind of feel like it's the Brady Bunch. If you guys remember the whole Brady Bunch, little tiles of videos and stuff, boom. We got what, the dysfunctional family right here we're working with. No, these guys are amazing. So these are a group of executives that I've been blessed to work with the past 12 months, working with them on emotional intelligent leadership. And I wanted you to kind of hear a sampling of the executives that I've had the privilege of working with and working alongside and learning from throughout this emotional intelligent leadership journey over the past 12 months. I will let them introduce themselves, but they are the senior executives of this company, and I'll again let them share what they're comfortable sharing and not sharing. And then once they get done introducing themselves, then we will get into some nitty gritty and ask them some questions about their emotional growth journey over the past 12 months. So Scott, let's just start with you. You want to introduce yourself and just share a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Scott Criswell, and I'm the president of Symmetry Hand Hygiene. I've been with this company 27 years, and my background prior was went to Indiana University, was an officer in the United States Army, a light infantry guy, so airborne, air assault, ranger, all that kind of fun stuff, and did a couple tours, one to Somalia, one to Haiti, one domestically to Hurricane Andrew. And so this is the only civilian job that I've had. And we have a program here called Screw Up, Move Up, and I'm really good at it. So that's why I've managed to stay here 27 years. But I might take a little bit longer on this introduction before the other two guys do, because when Noble said that we got started on this, it was kind of my fault. And I don't mean that like, hey, I'm cool. I mean that because I had started a personal journey towards the end of 2020. So you might imagine making hand sanitizer and being in that business. 2020 was, it was like Ranger School. It was something you're glad you did it, would never trade that experience for anything, would not want to have to requalify every year, if you know what I'm saying. So wouldn't want to do it again. But 2020 was the best of times and the worst of times. And so for me personally, I found myself one day in a meeting getting so uptight, which is not how I normally roll, but I literally threw a water bottle in the middle of a meeting. And that's not happened in 27 years. And I said, man, okay, something's going on. Like, I don't go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs like that. And I said, I've got to figure out, I can't operate that way. B, I don't want to operate that way. And if the speed of the group is determined by the speed of the leader, I've got to figure out something I need to work on, because I certainly don't want that duplicated. And so I personally took an EQ class through Noble strictly for myself, because I knew I needed it for work, for family, personally. And it was the result of that personal class that was so insightful, so beneficial, but I knew only kind of the tip of the iceberg, that I then contacted Noble and said, hey, this was great for me. Would you do something for all my key guys? And so that, if that helps contextually to know how we got here, it started with me addressing, all my drama. And then I just found it to be so beneficial that I said, man, if I could bless the entire team with this, it would be awesome. So that's maybe a little bit of background. And then Matt, if you want to maybe introduce yourself.
Hi, president of Ultra here at Buckeye International. I've been at Buckeye International for 20 years. No military experience. So, living in the shadow of a guy wishing I was in the military, hearing the stories we hear from your podcast, Noble, and the different folks you bring on, and having Criswell, as a mentor for many years, even before we get into this. But been at Buckeye for 20 years, and I'm the activator mentality, right? I'm ready to talk about EQ. So enough about me, and let's jump into it.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ryan Stewart, and I went to University of Dayton, and I started with Buckeye in 2009. So just finished 12 years here. I'm the director of international sales. And, to be blatantly honest, my EQ journey was right place, right time. It wasn't something that I went out and was seeking on my own. But I've realized quickly that there's a lot to learn. And as it's been unveiled for us, I've tried to take one bite at a time to eat the elephant, but it's been, very, very successful for me. And I'm sure we'll talk about that further. But my journey's I've been quite blessed with what we've been able to achieve so far. And there's a lot more to take care of. So I'm excited to talk about it.
That's great. Thank you guys for your introduction there. So first question, what was your initial impression, feeling, thoughts when in Phoenix, we are at this big giant MTV crib, and here comes Noble, and Scott said, hey, here's this guy Noble going to be busting out a day workshop on emotional intelligence.
I think it'd be good if we go reverse order here. Right? So let's go Ryan, Matt, and me on. I think it's going to be interesting thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Noble, I've shared this with you many times. I feel like I'm sitting back in that house in that chair. And my comment then was skepticism. And it was more of, one of my biggest strength is discipline. And, I just didn't understand what we were getting into. And in my brain, I feel like I've achieved a lot of things and I'm pretty confident in myself. And I'm like, how can this really change much of what I want to do personally, professionally, in my home life? We've talked about golf many times because it's a super mental game. And wow, man, from where we were in Phoenix to where we sit today, it's been amazing to think about how much effort I put into it personally and how much it's changed. But I was skeptical, not that I didn't think it didn't work. I just didn't know if it would work for me.
Resident sanguine here. I was not skeptical. Like I'm a guy who I love to learn. I love just learning new things. I've heard my wife works for a very large company who does emotional growth. I haven't heard it as EI, and then learned it a little different with the EQ EI side from you. But I thought I was really excited about it because I've always thought I was a people person. Come to find out a little different, as we've gone through this and getting results of taking the test. I think I took it pretty hard, and we could talk more about that because I think we're just talking initially Phoenix, but your initial reaction, I was excited to learn about it and probably had, because Scott was already kind of already doing things. And, I'm close with Scott from that. And I could just tell from his reaction, but again, having friends in large organizations using EQ, seeing those pieces, was excited that we were going to incorporate something in this vein, and just seeing what Scott was talking about already about it, I was pretty pumped up until second day of Phoenix, which we can just pause right there.
Yeah. I want to wait. I want to wait for that one.
Well, I think I want to come from the perspective of making sure people know that Noble, you and I had a history prior, right? So it wasn't like, I Googled EQ and I saw, EQ Gangster, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll sign up for this. You and I we've got to be going on, at least 15 years, maybe even closer to 20 of a friendship and a relationship, right? And so I think that's important because knowing how well I know you and would trust you before any of it, right? Like you're the kind of guy who said, dude, I can't tell you what's going on. I need you in St. Louis tomorrow. Like you and I have that kind of relationship, right? And vice versa. I would do it. And so I think that's going to make this seem even more shocking because I'm not sure I can explain how skeptical I was compared to Ryan, right? And for multiple reasons, because I think part of it was I knew my guys and I thought, okay, I was skeptical. Like these guys, I mean, if we can get buy-in with these guys, like these aren't guys that just go for flavor of the month, right? I mean, these are already high performing, high achieving, had, good track records. Like these weren't a bunch of guys searching for, hey man, I'm struggling, I'm floundering, like, man, I'm plateaued. Like, yeah, man, I need something, right? So I mean, you're talking about sitting in a Pro Bowl locker room, right? And saying, hey guys, you don't even really know how to play football yet. And it's kind of like, right? I mean, imagine Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers going, what are you talking about? Okay. So I thought, oh man, I'm like, we'll see. We may be done after day one, and so I think it was a double whammy for me, right? So I personally didn't have any EQ or emotional intelligence training, so I didn't even have my own frame of reference, and it sounded like I'm like, dude, are we just gonna go on a mountaintop and have a sweat, and we're gonna meditate on my feelings and emotions, and like I'm like, dude, like it was like file not found, right? So I think initially it was just there was no frame of reference to measure it by for me, and part of that was just my background, right? I mean, my dad, I grew up in Indiana. If you know who Bobby Knight is, that's kind of like who I grew up with as a father figure. Being in the Army, especially light infantry, especially going to Ranger School, no one talked about emotional intelligence or emotional health, right? Like that, dude, suck it up, man. Like we'll talk about that after the mission, So I had my own personal, I think, reservations, if I want to sound really cool. But I also knew bringing a team into this was a whole nother dynamic. And I was as concerned for what their response was going to be as mine. And I thought, okay, I know I need this, but I don't want to force my challenge onto this group and have these guys think, dude, you're just going through some personal drama. Don't bring that Jerry Springer show on us, And so, but clearly, I mean, fast forward, I think everybody realized, man, it's as good as we thought we were. And I think everybody is good. Everybody is doing well. But man, we can always ratchet that up, right? And so I think we quickly, I think, adopted it. But I wanted to spend time on and answer your question there. That this wasn't. You're not a guy that I just met at a networking thing 2 weeks ago, and you were running a special, and for $29.99, right? I was just going to test drive this deal and try it out, and my guys. So I mean, knowing how you and I knew each other for how long, over how many years, and the fact that I was still skeptical, I can imagine someone that doesn't have that history with you certainly might be as skeptical as me, right? Or as Matt and Ryan were. So I think universal, okay, we're going, but kind of like what you talk about, Willis, a little bit, I think was rolling around in everybody's mind.
That's great. That's great. All of you, that was great. Okay, now just one step forward here. How were you all feeling about the old EQI assessment? Pre getting it and post getting it. So what were your thoughts there?
Matt, this is an easy one for you. You were right there already.
Super easy for me because I think I've been one of the leaders of the team of thinking, and been bringing on a lot of accounts, brought around a lot of relationships into the business with large accounts. And a lot of the guys, even on the team, I think, I've spent a lot of time with them. So I felt like would crush any emotional intelligence tests. And if F minus was an opportunity, I think that's about where it, Google wouldn't hire me. Apple, good luck. Wouldn't get my foot through the front freaking door after getting that assessment, to the fact where I even told Scott, I said, you're going to have to give me a night to blow off some steam, and I'll get back on this on Monday, because I'm going to have to, just have a hell of a night tonight playing some euchre. But I think it was shocking for me, because with where I am and what I was doing, and then what that showed me and how accurate it was, right? Like, I didn't want to digest it. I'm like, I can't even digest this in one day. It's going to take me it probably took me a good 4 months. I'd say even 5 months until I really, because again, competitive people, right? I mean, you're not in sales if you're not competitive. And when you see that, you're just kind of like, all right, there's that other gear I've been searching for, is finding, it's really in myself. It's not anything else I can do. And I think that was the old rude awakening, from getting that test. So thought I was going to crush it, bombed it. I don't bomb too many things out there. So
Yeah, a lot like Matt said, I'm very competitive myself. I'm a major cleric, right? So I don't like to do things I'm not good at. So once I found out what we were doing, I'm like, I always have confidence, but I'm like, all right, let's see what happens. And I felt like I would do really well. And I got it back. And, much to my surprise, there was a few pieces of that assessment that I'm like, wow, those need work, man. Like, you got some Swiss cheese going on in your game. And but I also found, I'm like, my big currency piece is respect, right? So immediately I dialed into, I need to fix these if I want respect from not only the rest of the team, but the people that I manage professionally and everybody else I deal with, on a regular basis. So to me, it was kind of, it was like a funnel, right? It really highlighted the 2-3 things I needed to work on. And that's where I started, which is easier for me, because if I can dial in on something versus take on the whole, pie at once, I'm going to be more successful, because I am very, by the book and want to know exactly what I need to do, how to fix it. And the hard thing is, it wasn't a quick fix and still isn't fixed, but we are progressing. And I think that's the cool piece to, from the beginning to right after the end of the results from the assessment.
So I think for me, right, and again, taking it as the individual, but also knowing that I'm orchestrating this for my team, I feel like I have a dual perspective on everything, right? So for me personally, coming out of 2020, like I was just anxious to get some direction, right? I didn't care win, lose, or draw. Like I don't care what this test says I need to work on. I'm ready. You tell me, get a crew cut, great. Grow a beard, great. That's going to help me, great. Get some, get some sleeves, great, man. Like, let's go get the ink gun ready. Whatever crazy thing you would have told me was going to move the needle on where I felt I needed to go, I just was ready. That was just me personally. I did wonder, how accurate is this test going to be, right? Because it was so simple to take online. And I thought, how can such a simple test truly yield accurate feedback, right? I thought this was too fast, too easy. Man, I hope it's in the wheelhouse. And then certainly from a team or a group perspective, it was my concern was, this test better be accurate, because these guys will sniff out inaccurate in about 2 seconds. Like, if this is just, Matt, you're too laid back, and you're not very aggressive, and you don't like to share your feelings. Matt would be like, tear this thing up. Okay, you're wasting my time, right? And so I think that was my pre-test. And then I think post-test, it literally was like, dude, who is in my Kool-Aid here? Like, I mean, I couldn't deny the areas that I needed to work on, right? I'm like, I was looking, and I think the example I gave you then, Noble, was, I'm like, this is like an EQ mirror, right? Like I am looking in this thing going, oh my goodness, the good, the bad, the ugly, like this is me, like this. Yes. And so I knew it was that way for me. And then I knew it was going to be that way for the team. And then the other thing that I'll maybe mention from a whatever leader, supervisor, manager, whatever, the guy that get, responsible for the group, I knew that everybody would embrace it because it was true. And I knew that this was a group of guys that if you showed them a way they could get better, and it was real, it was authentic, and there was a path forward, that would be embraced, right? So once I knew how spot on it was, I'm like, oh, game on, right? Because now these guys would be like, oh no, 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 no. Yeah, I need to work on that. Okay, got it. Like I knew it would be, sharks to blood and water as far as, hey, you tell me where to go. I'm all over this thing, But I think I think all the guys would agree. Literally everybody in that room, as you were handing those out, was thinking, yeah, well, we'll see what this little thing has to say.
And then the funny thing was the lead up, right? So before I handed them out, oh yeah, you need to work on this. Oh yeah, well you need to work on this, right? They're diving each other out, and then they pass out the old report card, the old before photo, the old emotional intelligence before photo, right? It was library quiet. It was library.
Quietest that entire house was the 5 minutes following you handing out that assessment results. I mean, because you and I were looking at each other, and I'm just looking around the room, and I'm like, it's pretty quiet in here, And so that told me, oh, it's game on, right? It is game on.
Yes. So no, that was great. Okay, so let's do a little bit more maybe strategic question. So, and for those people that are either watching this on YouTube, listen to the podcast episode. So here's kind of the arrangement, what the relationship looked like this past 12 months. So I did monthly one-on-one coaching with each of the executives on Scott's team. And then we did monthly group coaching, and then we had 2 offsites. So that's kind of just for some context in terms of what that relationship looked like. So now, based on that, and then of course there were some in between, obviously each coaching appointment, things that we would come up with or work on, but between each appointment and everything. So now that that context has been set, what impact has this past year of EQ growth had on you personally and professionally?
For me, it's been eye-opening in the sense that, there's so much more out there to not only learn, but you also can quickly see, even if it's small or small increments, how fast changing something simple can make such a big difference for you. And, like I said earlier, I focused on 2 specific things, and I feel like I've come a long way with those 2 things, but it's changed the way I think about everything. It's not just my professional career, it's at home, it's my friends, my family, the way I treat people, the way I think about people, the way I even size people up and think, what is that person thinking? Or they might be really high in this, or alternatively they might be really low in this, and how can I help them? I've read more books this past year than I've read in my entire life. I just, I've shared it with you and certainly the team, but it was probably a year ago or so I came up with the little phrase, be better. And I think EQ has just made me think in everything I do, how can I be better? How can I become a better father, husband, professional? And it's more than just, trying to get better at self-awareness. It's getting better at self-awareness makes your life better. And that's what's been really cool for me. And the best part is you can always improve, right? I don't think you get to a point in this, program or whatever you want to call what we're doing now, but we're investing in ourselves. You don't get to the finish line and Noble says, hey man, you've achieved self-awareness, go work on something else. You can always get better at it. And to me, that's intriguing because I am very competitive and I want to be the best at certain things. But it's just become routine in my life, I guess would be the best way to explain it. I'm constantly thinking about it and always working on it. So to me, that's a pretty cool improvement to have something that you're always invested in. You know, you're all in all the time.
And so real quick, Ryan, so on a scale from 1 to 10, if you had to place a value on the impact that your growth journey has had on you over the past year, 10 being life transformational, 1 being, not much move the needle, where would you rate that impact in your own life on a scale from 1 to 10?
I would say a 9. I don't like absolutes, so I can't give it a 10. But I mean, the way I wake up in the morning and what I do before I go to work is different, right? The way I come home from work and what I do is different. You know, everything about my day-to-day operations is not much different. It's a little different, but those little things have made a big difference. So for me, it's been very impactful. And I'm not the same person I used to be in a good way, and I think people have noticed that.
I'll go next because Matt, I think I'm going to end with something that I want you to follow up on.
Okay.
Because you've got an interesting perspective on it. But for me, I feel like a different person, and I don't, I don't want to say that in a weird way. I don't want to say like I don't feel like I had some kind of disorder, or oh my God, I needed to get on medicine to help me or whatever. I mean, if you need that, great, go get help. But I just feel like I was not allowing myself to recognize and embrace different emotions. And again, I still picture there's some hardcore dude, that is listening to this going, dude, what a sissy. Like, what is, does this guy sleep with a teddy bear? Like, what is he, come on, man, and that's okay. But I think what's interesting now, because that was me, well, dude, I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? And so now when I hear somebody act like they don't need something like this, I actually say to I don't say anything to them, right? I just try to encourage them. But in my own mind, I'm thinking, wow, that person has the emotional intelligence of an adolescent, right? And it's sad in a way because I know how that is holding them back professionally, personally, spiritually, pick a category, right? And so, and what's weird is, I guess I'll dovetail off a little bit of what Ryan said. I don't feel like my routine in terms of what I do is radically different, right? It's not like, if I use a running analogy, it's not like I talk to Noble and I would get on a treadmill once or twice a week, and then you put me on this marathon like, dude, you got to run 5 days a week for 45 minutes to an hour. Every Saturday you're doing a 2-hour, 10-mile run. And it's like, dude, I mean, some of that would be overwhelming, right? So I think part of this, as I'm just listening to us talk, putting myself in the shoes of somebody that might be hearing it, you might be going, dude, if Ryan's going 9 because he can't give anything a 10, you must be asking these guys to do some things that I don't know, A, if I'm equipped to, and I don't know, B, if I would have the bandwidth to do it like that. If it's that life changing, you must have to quit your job, move to Colorado. You're doing these monthly sweats with Noble. And like, dude, I can't uproot my life and do that. Okay. And so I think it's these many minor tweaks that lead to new peaks. And so for me, it was something as, hey, clue phone, not very hard, but something as simple as going, Matt just made me mad. I'm actually angry right now. I'm angry at Matt. I would like to chokehold Matt and put him in a sleeper hold, right? But in the past, Matt might have done something to make me mad about, I don't have time to be mad. I don't have time to be excited, right? And so I missed out on, in my opinion, a lot of highs and lows in life. And I think you're not going to enjoy one without the other, because I was on this just, yep, okay, yep, what's next? Yep, no emotion, no time for emotion, right? Mission, whether I was in the Army or whether I was here. And I just feel like it completely robbed me of embracing what it can be like, right? And so if I was going to give maybe a more tangible, non-hyperbole example, and I'll segue to Matt here, for the one thing that I needed to work on big time was my reality testing, right? And so, and part of that was my personality. I didn't want to acknowledge that Matt made me angry because it was going to be unpleasant for me to go confront Matt. I'm saying Matt all the time because we worked together so long. He's not going to freak out that I'm using him in my Matt made me angry example, you know. But you know, because it was easy for me to embrace a happy emotion, right? Oh, Matt made me happy. He told me I did a great job in that presentation. That's easy, dude. That's easy to cope with, or it was for me. But now Matt made me angry. Okay. Oh, dude, that's not cool. Like, he's doing something that's going to hurt the organization. Like, I've got to address this. He and I are going to have this serious one-on-one chat. Dude, who wakes up and goes, man, I can't wait to go counsel somebody that did something wrong at work today. Like, I don't think that way. Right. But it is a necessary part of moving on and growing and being successful. And so that was something that I had to work on. And so now for me, because I focused on reality testing, there's very few scenarios that will shake my tree, like, because it's just, well, but it is what it is. I mean, Matt did this. I need to talk to him. Okay, let's go talk to Matt. Like, let's just have that done. You know, I'll be glad because now I'm not consumed with it. It'll help Matt because I really need to tell him because it's going to hold him back. And so that, hopefully that's just sort of a tangible example maybe of how it helped me. But the reason I wanted Matt to go after me is because I have told him repeatedly, I don't, it's not like I feel per se like a very different person. I don't feel like I'm not, it's not like I used to have a beard and I wore t-shirts and then I started wearing a suit every day to work. I mean, we dress like this every day, as you know. So it wasn't a wardrobe change. It wasn't I didn't change careers. I didn't move towns. It wasn't some massive change, but it was just the way I was thinking and the way I was processing my emotions. And for me, last thing, the key for me was those monthly follow-ups, right? Like it was not enough for me to just get okay, here's EQ, go do great things with it. No. Well, I mean, from where I was, I needed the checking in with the coach to go, hey man, you suggested this, like the emotion wheel, right? Hey man, I've been sitting down at dinner talking about the emotion wheel, trying to get more descriptive in what I'm feeling and what impacted me and how was that customer feeling, right? What do you think happened in that account when we did this for them, right? Like they don't look happy. Is that a process in our business that we need to fix, right? I need to address that with that customer. So I didn't feel like it was anything, oh man, like Noble should go on tour. Like no one's ever thought of EQ before. Oh my gosh, he's the Elon Musk of emotions, but yet it's had that profound of an impact. So anyway, enough from me, but Matt, I want to hear about you, but you have commented on me a lot because you've worked with me over 20 years, longer than anybody, and you've got a perspective that literally no one on the planet has.
It's hard to understand.
Matt, hold on.
Go ahead,
real
Noel.
quick. One other thing too, I want, and I want you to share whatever you're going to share, Matt. I do, but just one of the things, Scott, if you don't mind me sharing that, and I'm bringing this point up for a leadership point here. The other thing that I have observed, and Matt is going to actually bring up an aspect of what I'm about to say, is your emotional expression, which is one of the emotional intelligence elements there, has I mean, it's changed dramatically. And now, obviously, people that are listening, like, well, what does that mean? And who cares, right? So, okay, so Scott tells people how he's feeling now. What does that have any impact on anything? Well, let me tell you the impact. As somebody, so I'll say from a friend, and if I was on, because I've worked with another leader that is very similar that had very little to no emotional expression. How did I feel in terms of a junior leader connected to a leader who has little to no emotional expression? I felt like, even though I was very high up in this particular organization, and almost the 2IC of this particular organization, I did not feel connected to the leader at all. because there was no emotional expression. It was like working with a AI, some robot dude that, hey, how you doing? Fine. Okay, great. Like, dude, what'd you do this weekend? Did push-ups, you know, whatever, right? How's the family? Great. How's your wife doing? Great. How the kids? Fine. Awesome, bro. Like, dude, I feel no connection. And dude, that was after years and years. And I used to bust your chops. Like, dude,
Oh yeah.
how are you actually doing? No, but I'm actually doing fine. I'm like, I'm gonna give you something to not be fine about. Right now, I did not have the EQ to understand what I was feeling, but what I was feeling is I wasn't feeling connected to you because I didn't get anything. There was no vulnerability. I didn't feel like there was any vulnerability or transparency coming back from you as my homie. And again, you could also use the analogy as a leader also. I just didn't feel that I didn't feel like it was two-way street. Now that you are very transparent, very vulnerable, bro, the amount that your team can feel connected to you, I feel has changed dramatically. And now I'll let Matt kind of go into what he was going to share, but that's just another area that you've just made some tremendous, dude. And then one more thing, what impact, dude, has that emotional expression had on your family, right?
Yeah, I mean that piece, has been dramatic, right? Because I mean, I literally would give talks, and even if I was covering an emotional topic, I'm talking family, I'm talking on stage with a couple thousand people, like I would literally tell people, I don't have tear ducts, right? Like Rangers don't cry. Occasionally, my eye might sweat, but I don't cry, right? And so, because I just thought that would be a sign of weakness, right? But in reality, it's a sign of, it is a sign of weakness that you are that weak emotionally that you can't just sincerely say, hey, I'm upset, I'm emotional, right? I'm emotional about serving my country. I'm emotional about, whatever makes you, whatever cranks your motor in that regard. So, looking back, I think that's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have in life was that I didn't figure it out a lot sooner. And I think we've talked recently because of some of the next round of training we're going to get into, but about trust. And I think if it's tougher to trust somebody if you haven't really connected with somebody. And I don't think anybody would argue now you have a pretty good idea where I stand on things, right? And so when everything's just fine all the time, then you're not giving credit to those extreme highs, you're not addressing the extreme lows, and you're just trying to stay in this neutral emotional bandwidth of mediocrity, and you don't ever experience, right, what a real high can feel like. Because to do that, I have to open myself and put myself at risk of allowing myself to feel that low. Ooh, wouldn't want to do that, And so you can get cute with it, and all you're doing is robbing yourself of the actual complete experience.
Well, and I would almost argue that it's almost because I used to be the exact same way. So, I'm talking about you, but I 100% was the same way.
I wanted to start talking about, yeah, you, buddy.
But it's almost a form of gaslighting, in my opinion, because if the boss is expresses no emotions and hard as woodpecker lips, and well, that's number one, that's not real, right? That's not, I think most people are old enough to know that, dude, don't tell me you don't have problems and issues, right? If you have a pulse, you got some sort of challenge going on. You may be pretending, like, in fact, the line I got when I was a second lieutenant of the 82nd Airborne Division, infantry officer, don't let your soldiers see you sweat. And I'm like, from my people brain, like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, in fact, at my opening speech to my platoon, hey guys, I know you're about to try to smoke me on a run. Let me just end that little mystery right now. You are going to smoke me on the whatever run we're going to go on right now. There's no doubt in my mind. Look at all this real estate, right? I got a lot of real estate to carry around. You are going to smoke me on this run. Now I will never stop running, And if we go rucking, give me all the weight you can, and I will be the Energizer Bunny, right? So, and what I found was they love the transparency. Like, oh, okay, I guess we don't have to try to see if we're going to smoke him because we're going to smoke him here. Maybe he's going to do good at rucking. Like, transparency has a magic way of increasing connection, and which is going to be another question. So I know Matt's next, but I want you to be thinking about that because the next question is going to be, how has this journey, so we just got done talking about how it's impacted you, and of course we'll get Matt next. Now, so the next question is going to be, how has it impacted the culture of your organization? So individually and now corporately, but again, I want to hear from Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
I think parlaying off of Scott, I think going all the way back to Phoenix, and I'll do this real short and fast and talk really fast to speed it up for the folks on the podcast and on YouTube. But going back to Phoenix, I think the separation between exactly kind of what you're talking about right now, and it's on the emotional side and the business side is really important, because I think with Scott and reality test, like when we were talking about the reality testing, he and I have been together. We started a company that he's running right now, right? Together. And it was he and I. So this isn't me kissing the boss's butt. I mean, we were in the trenches together side by side for a long way. So it's a personal relationship, but also a boss relationship. And I think that's important to know, because when we go back to Phoenix and we look at that, when we get that test and you start talking about emotions, Scott tests off the charts compared to me, right? Like we shared it with each other. Man, we have a discussion. Mr. Humble down there, whatever, where's he, whatever one he's on, right? He tests off the charts. And then, as you were talking about 10-point gaps are what we want to work on. I mean, I got 30-point gaps, 40-point gaps that look like grandma's teeth, like it's just like trying to figure it all out. And was we're looking at it, I'm like, he ain't got anything. He doesn't have anything to work on. And I couldn't even wrap my head around it. Because again, I read a lot now. Like last year, I read like 40 something books. This year I'm on 30 something because your podcasts are getting in the way, and a couple other podcasts that I've gotten to enjoy. But I just couldn't understand the personal side and to be that big of gaps. And when you see what Scott's done on reality testing, and somebody that's a high achiever in a lot of things and doing what he's doing, like that it's crazy to see just that switch go on. And over the course of the last, what would roughly be 10 months. I mean, he's like, you don't smoke. I'm like, I don't smoke up your butt, dude. I don't do that. I don't roll that way. But to see the difference in him, our whole team, it's the old now discover your strengths. His strength goes up that much. We all go with him, because we all are like, man, more accountability, more understanding, more direct, because everybody wants to know from the leader what's the direction. And I think you kind of mentioned transparency a minute ago. Scott's always been very transparent. I mean, I always give him crap that you're transparency to a fault, right? There's some people that don't need to know information like this because they take it and do wrong things with it. But I think he's been more concise. It's just been more, boom, here it is, go. And I think for him, that's something I think that needs to be said, to understand those gaps in the test, and something it took me a long time to actually understand the gaps. I think I got about, a lot of 40, 30-point gaps to cover yet, even at this point. But for me, what has the journey been for me from the beginning? I think when you and I were talking up front, it's something I was working on at the beginning of the year, was listen, pause, think, and respond before I even got into EQ. And I started doing that, but this self-awareness alone, my self-awareness was horrible. Sanguine person, people pleaser, like you've talked about. I don't even it's not so funny down there, Scott, Stu. but it was I was a guy that would go out and meet a lot of people, it's almost like at a trade show. I'm the guy that's out at a trade show, bringing people in. These guys are back eating sandwiches, talking. I lure them into the den and, feed them to the sharks, per se. But I am that guy that's out and about, shaking hands, kissing babies, signing contracts, and didn't realize like this, self-awareness and social awareness, right? And just being that social side of it, of not seeing what I was doing with folks and how I was running them over. I mean, it frankly pissed me off. for lack of a better term. I mean, I think I've been angry for the last 8 months since then, right? I think I've just now kind of come to grips through the exercises we've been working on. And one of them being just making sure I'm asking 3 questions of people before I go all up on them. I don't quite give them a noble hug, but, pretty close. Might be licking their forehead and I don't even realize it, right? But I think that self-awareness piece for me really opened my eyes. I think listen, pause, think, and respond was big for me that we learned from Gary Phillips leading into that. But it's something I didn't understand how it connected to emotions and seeing how it connected my conversations with people, but then also gave me time to actually think more and give a poignant response and give a more, brief response in return. So I could go on and on about this topic, but I would just keep it. I'm still on block 1 on self-awareness and how that all ties into, the raising empathy and trying to get those things that we're trying to grow, but just being able to speak emotions in general too. I thought I was, but definitely that self-awareness has taught me to be able to just think about it, but just in general, just pause, think, and process my emotions. So I'm not stuffing, avoiding, stewing, and brooding.
Look at you, Mr. EQ gangster. What? So, one thing that, go ahead.
Something
Yeah,
about,
please.
again, I've worked with him so long. Here's what I would argue demonstrates the value of EQ. And Matt can agree or disagree with this, and please do if I'm off base here. But Matt and I have talked about many topics over the years, right? I have recommended all kinds of books. He and I have had all kinds of chats, and I'm not talking like, hey, you're jacked up, you need this book. Just as I have learned things, grown things, gotten exposed to things, I've always shared that with him. A lot of the things, and something that I feel like Matt has said a lot since we started EQ was, man, you talked about this forever, but EQ really unlocked the door for me, right? And so I feel like everybody took this very seriously. I feel like from my lens, Matt took it ridiculously seriously. And I don't know if it was because he had been exposed to a lot of things, but it just really hadn't penetrated him to the core. It was like EQ just kind of, gave the path for him to access all those other things we had talked about. And I think as a consequence, the reason he's eating up those books and applying it and getting the benefits and getting the change and making a difference is because that EQ variable now has sort of been his secret sauce. It was almost like it was that one piece of the puzzle that I didn't realize, he didn't realize. And once that got added into the equation, it was like game over. So that's just my take, Matt, from somebody.
Well, I think it was from getting that test, Scott. I mean, no doubt. I mean, I've always been a learner, right? I love information. I'm the guy who literally grabs anything and everything, and every spare moment I'm reading something to talk about. I think that's why I can chat with people. I know a little jack of all trades, master of none, right? But it just hit me because it was so much of it is emotions, and I thought I was good with emotions because everybody's like, you wear your emotions on your sleeve, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, on the inside I really wasn't, right? Like I'm just very on the surface as a person, I'm very outgoing, but on the inside it's like the duck's feet, right? Except I'm an upside down duck, right? It's the feeder on the outside, and I'm really calm on the inside and on the surface, but they're like, man, you seem really ticked off. And I'm like, no, not really. Like I just come across that way. But seeing how other people process emotions, and like when I got that test, I was so pissed because I'm so competitive as a person. But it opened up it was literally the key to go, oh my God, everything I've read was tied to emotions. Like, and now you see so many more books and so many more things that talked little bitty pieces of that, but it wasn't the overarching theme. But you nailed it, Scott. It's that it was the missing piece of everything that tied, at least for my personality type, right? For sure. like just for who I am and like what's on the outside, what's on the inside, and just understanding what other people are thinking. It's been crazy how it's all connected it all together.
And if I can say something, Matt, about your growth, and you hit it, but you hit it as a footnote, and I think it needs to be a headline. You now, I won't say that you were characterized by being angry. You definitely had some anger outbursts a number of times. That was kind of part of your normal, almost kind of like your normal thing. And I don't know how often and stuff, but to go from frequently, consistently angry outbursts to I think you said, man, I don't remember, having an angry, big giant angry outburst like I used to in 7 months. Dude, that is not a that's a major that's massive. And then, the other thing too that you mentioned is, and again, you kind of did a footnote that I think is a mass should be another massive headline, your empathy. Like now you listen for 2 or 3 things and or ask questions for that person, 2 or 3 things that you can learn about them before jumping into your agenda. How does that right? And the thing is, so here's the from the sales standpoint or the business standpoint, what are the results, consequences, benefits of no longer having a angry outburst? And not that you don't get angry and stuff. So that's not what I'm saying, but to go from a whole bunch to slim to none, and then to go from, hey, it's about my agenda, whatever, to I'm going to ask questions and find out 3 pieces of information about somebody to get to know them and connect with them before I jump into my agenda. What impact does that have, right? That's the real that's massive. And all 3 of you have, from the jump, taken ownership and embraced this journey, this EQ growth journey, which as a coach makes it so fun to work with you guys, because you're all teachable, you're hungry, you want to become the best versions of who that you can be, that who's God's called you to be. And it's anyways, that's just another thing, Matt, that I wanted to just highlight about some of the things that you mentioned.
Well, I think the outburst, I mean, we talked a lot about it at work. I mean, outbursts were more at home, having 3 kids and a wife and, you know, 16-year-old, 14-year-old, 8-year-old at home, especially an 8-year-old, like the 5 love languages, like we've been talking about, like Scott's recommended, just learning the love languages of your kids, but just not getting pissed at home and trying to leave everything, leave at the office, what you got to leave at the office. And I was good about going home, but it's easy to just get angry and, get angry with the ones you love, especially take it out on the ones you love and not at the office. But I think at the office side is really just the asking questions and listening. If you're a sanguine cleric type personality, I don't know what that is in the disc side of things, but I think sanguines definitely run people over. And I catch it more and more. When you run into a sanguine now, you got to be like, slow down, ask a question. Cause I mean, we could talk for 3 hours and not even know the clock, we didn't even know an hour. It felt like 15 minutes. But I think that's been one of the biggest things. And I still fail at it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm got a long way to go. I don't do it. It's not like I'm perfect at hitting it every time, because at the position I'm in, sometimes I just need an answer at this point. But somebody new you meet, like you're going in, or if you haven't talked to them in a little while, man, how's your month been going? What have you been doing? How's it? What you got going for Christmas? And just and Stu are great at that stuff. Just not my personality leading up to that point, but EQ growth, empathy wise, it's been amazing.
How has this journey impacted the culture of the organization?
Until I read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, that would be a relatively tough question to answer, because we are successful in our own little world that we live in, as a team, and everybody does a good job. And, we believe we're kind of the elite task force. And, if you don't know how good someone is, just ask them, they'll tell you, which I think you summarized that pretty well at the beginning when we, you got the books and there was silence in the room when we got our assessments back. But I think the avoidance of accountability, which is that, one of those five dysfunctions, is something that we've taken head on. And, you'd laugh like if you had our, offices bugged, and maybe you do because you're a former Ranger, but, we speak a different language than we used to. Like, we use words and terms out of the book that, we learned through our little sessions and our one-on-ones constantly. And Matt did it at lunch. Like, we'll even point out like, hey man, that's good self-awareness, or hey, that's good reality testing. And I think it keeps everybody checked that not only do we have coaching sessions and all these other things happening, but there's constant accountability in everything we do, whether it's, hey man, you didn't wash your hands when you were in the bathroom, or there's a big, deal that you need to work on that, maybe you need to do X, Y, and Z to close. So, I think the culture certainly improved, and I think we all still have a long way to go. But I will tell you, we look forward to our group sessions and our group time, whether it's us together down at the ranch, or even if we all just have lunch together one day when some of the guys are in town, because I think it's brought us closer together, and we're not afraid to talk about it. And I think that's the other key point that really, because again, just like the book says, trust is another one of those five dysfunctions, right? I feel like we've all gotten closer because we've been on this journey together, and we've done our own improvements behind the scenes, and then we've done our improvements as a team. And it's really, really been beneficial to watch. And I mean, Scott can speak to that more than any of us because he's the true leader of the group. But the culture's definitely changed for the better, and it's exciting.
But I think culture-wise, it's been, I mean, we started out as a 2-man team, grew to a 9-man team. I don't know if the context is really there for what our team is, but there's 3 of us on here. There's another 6 sitting behind the scenes that aren't on this podcast. But we had a year last year that was really challenging when COVID's going on. And I think it created a good divide within our team, right? Scott Rapleen and myself and pulls us into a room with one of our IT guys, and we run a war room for sanitizer, where you're putting in, long days. We're putting in roughly 12 to 16-hour days for a long part of that. And then turning around, and the other team members are left out of that, right? So you got a command central and you're not really in. So I think that drove a pretty good wedge. And I think that EQ really helped us because I would sit there in that room and be like, suck it up, you big wimp, like it just the mentality. And I think culturally, you came in a really good time whenever, like what Scott spoke to earlier, where he was frustrated to a point where he's never been put into that position to have to make those decisions. But I mean, we were under fire really hard in 2020, and coming into 2021, like we were all exhausted, and now we're getting ready to launch this new line. We're getting ready to do all these crazy things, take over the world, because that's the way we roll. But, like emotionally, I don't think if we as a team would have talked about emotions and understanding who we really are, and like knowing where we fit within an emotional self-awareness, but also emotional regard for yourself, like knowing where you fit, man. Like knowing, it's not like saying you fit A, B, C, and D in a block, but just where are you within the team, and like are you really carrying the weight? And I think our team sessions show a lot about that, man. Like BDC and all that fun stuff that we've talked about, and just some of the thought process you've injected into our team. I think it's helped our culture big time, but I think for me, it's helped me understand where our team all fits together and where we can help lift them with their strength, what they're good at, and help lift them into things, into positions that they're not seeing, take their blind, clear their blind spots for them, help lift them into positions to power their strengths. And especially through, I mean, it's all emotional, right? Like if I'm like, go, 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 because that's who I am. I'm not taking the time to go and stop, listen, pause, think, respond about what their thoughts, feelings, and emotions are about it. I'm not going to help that person move forward. And I think culturally, we're all doing that. I mean, I've always said I love you anyway to everybody. So kind of always been, everybody thought I was weird, but now everybody's like, love you, man. Again, we're not sitting around in a big kumbaya circle, which I know it's cool for some people. Probably not quite there yet as a culture, but I think our culture as a whole has become much more connected emotionally and care much more about each other, but also pushing each other, pulling each other versus pushing each other has been what I've noticed.
That's good, man. I think my thoughts to wrap that up would be, I'm going to go back to where I started, which was coming out of 2020. My big concern that obviously started with myself, but bled over into the whole team was as crazy successful from a strictly, black and white sales revenue perspective 2020 was. It took a massive toll on the troops, right? So, Noble, when you and I talked, I still think like a military guy, right? And I'm like, it's like we were on this year-long deployment in 24/7 combat ops, and now, we've got to try to assimilate back into society, right? And we're going to get a little bit of a breather here, but the op tempo, it's not like we're going to go, red where we're on block leave and, we're just going to, pick up trash and police the barracks. And, we had another very active, very busy year. And so most of the guys in our crew are probably, mid 40s to, let's say, early 30s. So they've got a lot more of their career ahead of them than they do behind them, right? I'm probably, a little bit different there at my age, but I want these guys to be successful for the long haul. And you can't ignore emotional intelligence and think that you're going to be set up for success for the long term. Can you have short-term games? Absolutely. But if you're really in it for the long game, that is a component that you have got to figure out. And that is what I wanted to achieve. That my whole goal was, if we can grow in this area, it will help everybody professionally. But we're not two separate people, right? I'm not emotionally healthy at work and then I'm emotionally jacked up at home, right? I mean, if home life is jacked up, work life's going to be jacked up, and vice versa. And so I wanted us all just to be better, Ryan, because I knew that it would be serendipitous no matter what metric you wanted to use: work, family, spiritual, physical, whatever, right? And so I do feel like that's where we've come in really a relatively short period of time. I mean, as the time of this recording, we're a couple days before Christmas. It was January, right, when we brought you out, and I was afraid to, open the assessments and see if everybody was going to revolt and we'd be done. And so the fact that we're all saying this is meaningful, this has had massive impact on us personally, professionally. I mean, pick a category. To me, that would be an unbelievable goal to say, hey, I'd love to have this be where we end up at the end of this little journey. And but I didn't even have the frame of reference to say that was my goal when we started. It wasn't like I didn't know enough to say, man, I'd love to tell you that we're at where we sit today. But I didn't know what this could look like. So I just knew we needed to get started on something that would be sustainable to help everybody grow long term, because every one of these guys is going to be running a division of this company, right? Like the future leaders of this company, all the VPs, all the presidents, all the CCO, CEO, pick and O, right? Like a lot of those guys are going to come out of this crew, And so I felt like that something had to change, right? I knew that what I had done had only gotten us this far. And I was missing something to help get us to that next phase or that next level. I just didn't realize this is what it was. But I can tell you unequivocally now, I feel like we have unlocked it, right? And if we will just stay the course, I think it's going to be unbelievable. We'll look back in 2 or 3 years and we'll kind of laugh at, can you imagine we used to try to do things without EQ, right? And we'll all kind of poke fun of it, and we can, laugh at how we used to try to deal with things. And so I do feel like it would be the equivalent of what you and I would refer to as a combat multiplier, right? It's not that you didn't have basic skills to get the mission done, but man, isn't it easier if you can call in, an AC-130 gunship, and now we're not limited to, the inherent weapons that my little light infantry platoon has, but I can, we can put glint tape on our helmets and, light up the target and go, hey man, take those combatants out on the other side. And so I just feel like this is one of those combat multipliers for us. And I'm wildly excited, not just about what it'll do for us as a company, but what it will do for every one of those folks as an individual.
Love it. So this is the last thing here, 30 seconds apiece. One EQ growth hack that you have found really effective and helpful for your own personal emotional growth journey. 30 seconds to a minute, one EQ growth hack that has really been a game changer. Ryan, we'll start with you, and then Matt, and then Scott.
Probably won't get far on mute. Now I have 25 seconds. Transparency, self-awareness was one of the things that I really needed to work on, and was probably my biggest downfall after the assessment. And one of the things you and I spent a lot of time talking about in those first few, one-on-one sessions was, how do we fix that? What can I work on to improve that deficiency? And the pre-charge time, we talked about the drive into work. What are you doing on those 25, 30 minutes? But even before then, so literally roll out of bed, and the first thing I do every day is spend that pre-charge time, have a coffee in the dark. Nobody's awake in my house yet. Read my little Bible verse. And then in the shower, I can think about what I need to conquer for the day. And by the time I get in my car, that's already done.
We use 10 seconds. May use 10 seconds to call out James, Nick, and Cora and Place on their good growth that they've had too, because I don't think we've mentioned their names personally in this thing. But I mentioned one hack for me, EQ slowing me down, was asking the number one, starting to ask those 3 questions. Something else that's been real good and putting into buckets, like we've talked about over the last 3 or 4 months, was things I'm thankful for, and putting them into those buckets, and the emotions and how they fit into those buckets. So I think when I get frustrated with things, I write down things that I'm thankful for. And that's been really big. But then also, how am I feeling with family and at home, and trying to break those things down to define those emotions. And the last thing would be that mood meter app. Got back on it pretty good. I was hard at it. Took about 2-3 weeks off in a row, big grind that I was in. And just being able to define how you're feeling through those bucket pieces, like we've talked about, like you've talked about in your podcast. But I think those have been big, and being what I'm thankful for is really important.
So that's so hard to do in 30 seconds. I feel like I need like 30 seconds, but in 30 seconds, for me, it would be, and I'll credit Kathy Gibbons, because in the course that I took before ours, Kathy went into great detail about acknowledging physically what happens when you feel these emotions, right? And so I have really studied that, right? Is my face getting flush? Is my chest getting tight? Right? Am I, I see Brian, or my fist clenching up, like, why didn't he give me a 10? And so, but trying to say, because in the past, I would never verbalize it, right? But you can't deny, even if you don't tell people what you're thinking, your body still reacts to the emotion, right? And so me making the connection of, okay, why am I starting to feel that, right? Why am I getting short of breath? Why do I have butterflies in my tummy? What's causing that, connecting that to the emotion. And then once I do that, it's easier to verbalize it, right? Hey, Matt, I'm nervous about this because I feel like I didn't get enough time to prep. Ryan, it hurt my feelings when you didn't give me a 10 when I really thought I deserved a 10, and so that would be mine, connecting, noticing it physically, and then allowing that to trigger me to say, okay, I've connected it. And then now actually sharing and verbalizing, hey, this is what I'm experiencing.
Awesome. Great. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely appreciate it. So excited to work with you guys this next year. And thank you for all that I have learned from you guys, right? The iron sharpening, Proverbs 27:17 is iron sharpens iron. You guys sharpen me. And it's been a blessing learning alongside you and growing myself. I tell you guys, man, I'm very much on this path and this journey myself. I do not coach from a perspective of, having all this stuff figured out. It's been